Nothing changes if nothing changes. But here's the thing. A lot has changed, is changing, and will continue to change when it comes to how financial brands can continue to level up their loan and deposit growth. However, how have you changed as a financial brand leader? What about your organization? How is your organization changing? And more importantly, what can you do to continue to keep up, to continue to move forward with courage, with confidence, to navigate the complexity of change, especially if you're feeling a little tired and burned out by change? Well, let's find out together on today's episode of the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
You're listening to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Banking on Digital Growth podcast. I'm James Robert Lay, founder and CEO of the Digital Growth Institute, where we make it easy for growth-minded financial brands to uncover their biggest buying journey blind spots so that they can quickly stop losing loans and deposits. Today's episode is part of the Exponential Insights series, and I'm excited to welcome Carey Ransom to the show. Carey is the managing director at BankTech Ventures, and he's been writing a fantastic series titled If I Were a Bank CEO. I look forward to talking through a couple of articles within these series to help guide you along your own journey of growth at your financial brand. Welcome to the show, Carey. It is so good to share time with you today, buddy.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Absolutely. You and I have been exchanging messages back and forth on LinkedIn for a while. And I was like, you know what, let's just have the conversation because I appreciate your perspective, your thinking. You've been writing a great series, If I Were a Bank CEO. I want to surface some of these points of view that you have been sharing. But before we do that, what has been going well for you? What is good in your world right now? Personally, professionally, it's your pick to get started.
Well, from sort of personally, I've had a great summer. It's been great to have the whole family at home. I have two kids of my three that are in college now, and so having them around the house more for a few months is a special treat and one that I cherish because I know it's probably not going to last for too many more years. And so we've had a great summer, and I've been off the road a little bit. I typically travel a lot, many weeks of the month. And so to be home for most of the last couple of months has also been a treat before that picks back up with the fall. And so it's been a good time to be home. And I usually try to use that time also to reflect on what's working, what could be better. And so it's been a good time of year to do that and really look at what's happened in the economy and in banking and in the investment world around startups that we play with as well, and just see, okay, where are the trends, where are the changes happening, and where should we be positioning ourselves to be most impactful in the months and years ahead.
Yeah, you talk about you've got 2 out of 3 kids in college. We're not there yet. My wife and I, we have 4. They're 14, 12, 10, and 8. We are entering into a new phase, a new chapter, because our oldest will be a freshman. So I'm thinking 4 more years before that first one goes into college. But it's a weird time because we have a freshman, but then we also have an 8-year-old. So we'll be in 4 schools next year. We have high school, junior high, middle school, elementary. And I'm thinking the schedule is going to be, we're going to have to be very on top of things. The good news, my wife, she runs the house. She's like a CEO at the house. So she has that entrepreneurial mind herself. So she's got it under control, but she's just thinking it's going to be a whole new level of operational efficiency required to get through the next 9 months or so as we're getting started back to school. You mentioned too,
good luck. It's that's a lot. But what a fun time.
It really is,
of ages and activities. And I mean, I have to look somewhat in the rearview mirror at some of those now, and just what an amazing number of memories.
Well, and I think that's what we did with our kids this year. Instead of doing like a traditional Christmas gift or anything like that, we did what are called the 12 months of Christmas. So each month we picked an experience that we would do as a family. And so we just had our August experience. We went to a Houston Astros game on this past weekend. And these little memories. We're making these deposits, and whenever we get to the end of the year, we'll have a photo album. And I'm like, we should probably kind of keep this tradition up. My wife was like, maybe not once a month, maybe we'll do once a quarter because once again, the logistics and the planning. But you're right, it is
Mhm.
capturing, because when I'm looking in the rearview mirror thinking, my goodness, they were just all like 5 years old and under, and then here we are, a whole new chapter, a whole new season. And speaking about that, you're talking about reflection, yourself, new chapter, new season, change. What have you seen change the most in 2024 that has surprised you over the year?
I think the thing that's probably surprised me has been the change I've seen in and maybe just give you a little bit of a level set. We work with over 100 banks who have all joined our strategic investment fund called BankTech Ventures, and so I spend a lot of my time talking to banks. And what I've seen change that I did not anticipate. I sort of expected 2024 to be a little bit of a neutral, people trying to just keep and maintain what they're doing type of year. And it's very easy in a presidential election year to use that as an excuse for inaction.
Mm,
I'm going to wait. Let's see what happens. I'm not sure how I feel about the economy. Let's wait. Let's see what happens. And I've been pleasantly surprised at the number of banks who have realized we can't wait any longer. We have to act. We have to not just plan, but start doing and making the positive changes and transformation if we're going to keep going as an independent bank. And if we're not, we need to start making plans and act toward a change there, which probably means we need to get the bank ready for sale. And we've seen that start to pick up a
sure.
little bit this year after several years of that not happening. And so I think it's been actually more activity than I anticipated so far. And so I sort of expect that to continue even with all the media driven uncertainty that we have to either ignore or tolerate on a day-to-day basis.
One of the things I wrote about in Banking on Change was a framework, ACT for growth. ACT is an acronym where awareness plus commitment is the path that leads to transformational growth. And I think
Mhm.
hearing you, it's like we've been doing all this knowledge and information gathering. We have the awareness, but maybe up until this point, we haven't made the commitment to move forward. What do you find holds financial brand, holds bank leaders back from making that commitment to take action and keep moving forward even in uncertain times?
I think part of it is a experience and confidence of doing it.
Sure.
If you look backwards, banking was a pretty consistent and predictable business
Yeah.
for a long time. And even with that, if you really peel it back, banks have been through very challenging times, different economic cycles, different interest rate cycles, all kinds of regulatory changes. I mean, they have been resilient, but for whatever reason, they tend to look backwards with the okay, things were quote unquote easier or more fun or whatever nostalgic positivity we tend to apply. And so I think the confidence of we need to move at a faster pace and maybe a more radical versus incremental
Mm,
change mentality scares people. And without a vision for what that could look like fully transformed,
sure.
I think a lot of them struggle from that elephant is really big in front of them and not knowing where to start, which bite to take on first. And I love that you use the acronym ACT because in my opinion, in a lot of cases, it almost doesn't matter where you start first. It's about actually doing. And you're going to start building that muscle. I talked some about that transition, and I grew up in the software industry. In the early parts of my career, the movement from waterfall development as a process for how you build software to Agile is how you build software. And
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been in a waterfall environment for a long time. I mean, well over 20 years. And Agile is not just a software development approach, it's a business operations
Yes.
approach. And I think a lot of banks have really operated it as waterfall based companies
Yeah.
in how they think about projects, how they think about change. And they need to get much more comfortable with Agile as just a methodology for continuous improvement and breaking things up into much more manageable and also risk managed chunks. And so that is, I think, what is a big change that just slows people down from starting. They haven't done it. They don't have people around them that have done it. And change feels scary when you don't feel like you have people that have been through it in at least enough experience to guide you on that journey. And one of the adages we use a lot within our team is just knowing that bankers generally feel much more comfortable if they've seen and can touch someone who looks very similar to them, who's done it successfully, and can sort of lay it out for them
Sure.
in a way that they can understand. And so we summarize that often as most of our banks want to be first to go third. And they like to see that someone has done it successfully, and it just feels safer. They don't want to be last. They want to feel like they're staying current and relevant and sort of the fast follower,
Right.
but they want to see that others have sort of paved that way for them.
One of the Another framework that I laid out in Banking on Change, I call it the 90-day growth method. And it's back to your point. You're coming from software. The first 10 years of my business was agency with more of a focus on web dev. And so similar type of a perspective. You hit on two key points within the 90-day growth method. First and foremost, yourself creating space and time to review, to reflect, i.e., measuring progress, not necessarily perfection, but where have we come from? And then the other is we just got to just do. It doesn't matter where you start, you just got to do. And so if we take all of that, combine them, coming back to awareness is gained through the season of learning and thinking, and then we have to commit to then do and then create the space and time to review, because that's where the transformation happens, and then cycle back through the learning, the thinking, the doing, the reviewing, and having a framework that guides along that path. I want to dive a little bit deeper here, because I often hear bankers and even credit union leaders, James Robert, I'm too busy. I'm too busy to pause. I'm too busy to reflect. We just got to keep doing. In fact, we did some research around this when writing Banking on Change, and the vast majority do not create that space and time. And so they don't feel like they're making progress. I think of one organization that we recently worked with and did a digital growth blueprint for. They shared their Clifton Strengths Finders with me. All aspirational leaders, very driven. But when I started surfacing this, they said, I get it. I understand. We're not taking time to pause and reflect and review the progress. I said, yeah, it's not going to be perfect, but at least it gives you a sense of accomplishment. And that then will go and create confidence to keep moving forward. Because if I look at this, there are very specific steps, more psychologically, of clarity leads to courage. Courage then leads to commitment. Commitment then, when repeated, leads to an increase in confidence. But the antithesis of clarity, it's confusion. And I think that's where just people get stuck and they make a decision to make no decision. And we just keep doing what we've always done. What's your recommendation on creating that space and time to review what we've been doing, to gain some perspective, to gain new clarity, to learn, to then think, to do even better going forward into the next iteration, practically speaking, from your experience here?
Yeah, I agree. It has to be a very intentional exercise. And I don't know that I would prescribe a single way to do it. I've learned that I have a particular way of learning, and I'm a synthesizer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just gather all kinds of inputs from conversations, from reading, from listening, and I iterate on my own. And often what I will do is I'll come forward ready to have a point of view when I'm ready to do that.
Yeah.
And I like to be challenged. I might trial balloon things, and some people, because maybe I sound convinced, may take it as, oh, he's already decided, even though and so I have to give people permission to challenge me. And so I think figuring out what is your approach to that, and how are you going to best reflect or learn. And if it's not, if you're not interested in that growth and learning yourself, and you realize that, I'm not sure what to tell people there, other than maybe you need to find people in your organization that you can empower to be that, and encourage and expect them to bring those ideas and celebrate that, even if it's not natively you, because you need somebody to drive the train, and then you don't necessarily need them to have to be the visionary leader as an operator. They may be good at just operating the business, but you need that around in the group. And so I don't think you want everyone in the team at that senior level to all have the exact same strengths or exact same personality, right? Like that's an argument for diversity. So you need that at either the dreamer or entrepreneur type, and to give them the permission and space to go do that and challenge you and hopefully the organization on ways they can improve. So I think it starts with that whole, know thyself first, and then how do you solve for where either you need to be able to go do that or bring others in.
I really appreciate that. And one of the things that we found when writing Banking on Change was, I want to say it's around 70 or 80%. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but 70 to 80% of financial brand leaders are investing 1 to 2 hours or less per week in ongoing, we'll just call it learning and development. But when we look at some of the secondary market research, particularly coming out of Silicon Valley, they're recommending at least a minimum of 5 hours of continuous learning and development just to keep up with the rapid pace of change and transformation that's happening. And you're right. When you're talking about the visionary versus the operator, visionary versus the integrator, it makes me think of the work of Gino Wickman in Traction, and his whole VI vision integrator model. One is not better than the other. We need both roles. We need one to continuously be looking out towards the future, but then we also need someone here to make sure that the future becomes a reality based upon operating in the present day. So real good perspective to balance those out. And I know before you and I hit record, another framework that we use, or methodology, is the Kolbe profile. So you've got DISC, Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, etc. That looks at more of the effective part of the brain, where Kolbe looks at the cognitive part of the mind, brain, mind. We're talking about the mind with this, the OS basically. And when we're looking at Kolbe, it's how an individual and how the team naturally takes action or solves a problem. What we often find, though, is what's called cognitive cloning, meaning that they are over indexing on certain aspects or operating modalities within the Kolbe framework. And that is where indecision or analysis by paralysis comes back into play. I want to shift the conversation here because I want to get into a couple of the perspectives that you have shared. If I Were a Bank CEO series that you've been writing, and if you are watching or listening and have not read these, you can go to banktechventures.com and go to the Market Intelligence Hub. Highly recommend this series here, If I Were a Bank CEO. I want to surface volume 3, which is investing in an online presence. And you write here, Carey, quote, "If I were a bank CEO, I'd hire," and this is all bold, "an internet sales manager, an ISM, like every auto dealer in the country has done over the last 15 years. You continue, "This may sound odd, but please stay with me and let me explain." What's your take here? Because this is very similar to thinking that I've been thinking about. You have a little bit of a different perspective, but why an ISM or an internet sales manager when it comes to investing in an online presence?
So part of why I went there, James Robert, was just that it was something people could point to. It was a change that happened in an industry that a lot of people have experienced, and could point to. And I think part of why I've enjoyed expressing some of my thoughts through this is just to try to make it a little bit more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And just and so the idea of an internet sales manager was this notion. People moved many, many years ago in significant numbers to shopping for their cars online.
Yeah.
And now, like my last, I don't think I shared it in there. My last 3 or 4 cars I've bought completely online. And I'm very comfortable with that.
Right.
And in fact, I would do it on my phone. And I wrote something the other day about, I guess I'm apparently Gen Z because I will make significant purchases all on my phone. And if I can't, I get frustrated.
Right.
But what happened is people started going to the internet to shop. They shop for cars, they shop for houses. The idea that they wouldn't shop for financial solutions there, and that an industry doesn't realize that they are actively out there gathering information and looking for a proxy for what it would be like to interact with their bank there is confounding to me. And so the internet sales manager has been this evolving role. And I think that was sort of my point to say, you need to have people out there looking for sales opportunities for your bank online and wholly online. And those have started to emerge. You have a number of marketplaces that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And certain banks and certain people within those banks have started to recognize that, and maybe they register to participate in that marketplace.
Yeah.
And that may mean that somebody looking for a commercial real estate loan can fill out an application on that site and get paired with a number of potential bankers on the other side, and those that understand how the internet buyer, how they
Yes.
shop, how they think, what they expect. That's what started to happen in consumer retail automotive. Was these people started to become very good at understanding that buyer psychology, that buyer expectation, and how to give themselves an advantage there. And I think that to me is that sales mindset of, how do I make it easier for people to buy from me and my bank? And I think that was really what I was trying to intimate through that, through a somewhat tactical exercise. But the idea was a little bit bigger, that they should be able to find the places online where consumers or businesses are that they would want to work with, and meet them there. And it's about extending the bank out to where the market is, not expecting that the bank is the market any longer. People are not natively walking into bank branches very much in 2024 to establish a new relationship. And in fact, I would go even further. I talked to a banker this week who posited for his bank, if a business customer walked into one of their branches looking to establish a relationship with them, he would initially be highly suspect, almost expecting that they would be fraudulent and trying to do something nefarious because of that. So it's gone so far the other direction to think, oh wow, we're a great option because of our location, to they may be trying to pull something over on us if they're walking in here now.
I can see this is where such a cultural transformation, a cultural mindset shift is required. And a lot of this is through the work that we've been doing specifically over the last 4 or 5 years since writing Banking on Digital Growth. We did a lot of research around this. 86% of financial brands at the time, back in 2019, 2020, had never mapped out digital buying journeys, which is very different than what the buying journey would have been historically. And that's important because, just for context for those watching and listening, 87% of consumers, through our website secret shopping studies that we did an exit survey, 87% were starting their buying journey with a Google search. What about the other 13%? Well, they were asking their friends and family, or they're going to social media to get some perspective, and then going to Google to verify. On the mortgage side, 92% of people who bought homes in the previous year did research online before reaching out to a lender. That was Ellie Mae. Google, on the deposit side, found that the average consumer starts thinking about switching to a new account, doing that research 2 to 3 months before they take action. And then from a comparison standpoint, consumers are using, and this is back to the Google study, 9 different sources of information to help them make a financial decision. And a lot of times we're seeing that from a growth standpoint, it's still a branch first perspective. And I'm one who's not saying that the branch is dead. It's just that the way that the buying journey has transformed, we have to consider what's driving that. There's exponential changes in technology that has driven changes in not just the competitive landscape, but other shopping buying experiences. Back to your point, auto's a great example. And those experiences from a consumer perspective are then transforming consumer beliefs, and we know the role that beliefs drive in behavior, action, habit, etc. What's your recommendation for someone watching or listening, since we're talking about the internet sales manager? Because I've been advocating to build websites that sell, increase lead generation conversion points for different stages of the buying funnel, not just apply. We need consideration, and we also need higher up in the awareness stage.
Sure.
What's your recommendation to help transform the cultural mindset and perspective to help influence progress down this path, down this journey here?
Yeah, I think part of my reasoning behind introducing the idea of this like internet sales manager is it's been a evolutionary role within automotive. So if you think, and I've never really worked meaningfully in the automotive industry, but I've been a car buyer, car owner for a long, long time. And I just watch, and I've been in a lot of different businesses. So I do understand buying journeys probably better than some people. And if you think about the early days of the internet sales manager was to try to get that person who started on the internet to come to the dealership. Now, to your point, it has moved to being able to complete a transaction completely online without ever coming to the dealership. And so it's moved through a series of changes, and some of that has been new technology enabling inventory to come online or the entire purchase process to come online. And if I think about it from a bank standpoint, I go, look, the easy place would be to have this person who's dedicated to go find customers where you can online.
Yeah.
And maybe in some of the early days, that means you need to get them to a phone call. You need to get them to maybe come to the branch until you can start to determine what you need. And you can, in conjunction with that, better understand and start to map out your buying journey and then know what solutions you should put in place to help your bank differentiate itself through that journey for the ideal customers you want to bring on. And so I look at it as much a early entrance to start learning the things that you should learn and keep evolving it. It is not a silver bullet that you put in place, because this is a dynamic environment that continues to evolve and be competitive. And I think the biggest trigger has been COVID, if you really think about it, because you had a lot of habit formed customers who were coming in the branch, who you had to figure out how to bank, and they had to figure out how to do banking without that for at least some period of time. Many of them changed their habits forever and are now fully digital customers. And any new ones that you're going to try to appeal to today, particularly as a community bank, which is the world that I tend to live in, they're going to be best equipped or best satisfied with the perfect combination for them of tools and relationship.
Yep.
They want, community bank at its best is high tech and high touch.
Yeah.
And increasingly, customers don't want to have to give up one for the other.
Sure.
And if they care about relationship, they will work with a community bank, but they don't want to compromise on having at least good enough tools and capabilities to do the things when and how they want to do them. And so that is that combination that a lot of banks are right now trying to figure out what they need to have in place for this era, that the reality is not going to be static for very long, is going to continue to evolve, and they need to build that muscle of being able to iterate and evolve into the model as well. So it's move quickly and implement things and then keep doing that.
Yes.
And maybe that is tiring, but it's the new reality of what you need to have in you to operate this kind of business.
I'm so happy that you reference back to the COVID experience. You also are honoring the fact that, yeah, this can feel tiring. I've heard those exact words, like, James Robert, I'm exhausted. Is it going to get, I was like, and I have early podcasts. I mean, this whole podcast was the result of being gifted lemons. The book was supposed to launch in April of 2020, Banking on Digital Growth. I remember when I got the email from Amanda McCoy, CEO at the Financial Brand Forum, saying, nope, we're shutting this down. And it was like, I had a book tour lined up, and it was like declined, canceled, waiting. And I'm like, I'm not going to lie. I went to the Gap griping about problems for about a week until my wife, in her own choice words, pulled me out of that, got me back on track. And I took the lemons and made lemonade. And I said, you know what? We're going to launch this podcast. And I'm so grateful. Looking back, I'm so grateful that we had that experience, because I was so stuck in doing things in a certain way that it was the pattern interrupt that really said, I wonder how we could transform this. So we had the podcast, we launched its top 5%. I think it's going to be pretty close, top 3% global podcast very, very shortly. And grateful. And that's because it's just a testament to the conversations that we continue to have to help other people, to help level up their perspective. But you, speaking of perspective, I want to loop this all the way back around what you said about your own experience of just buying cars, and that you're like, I've done this. I know what it feels like. And the idea of feeling and emotions in a buying journey. One of the other articles that you wrote in the series, volume 7, digital customer experiences, you write, quote, if I were bank CEO, I'd make sure my team is well versed and oriented around digital customer experiences. I'd want them to understand the power of first impressions and how we evaluate ours. And the reason I'm wanting to surface this is because when we talk about experiences, that connects back to this point of the internet sales or manager. I look at experiences as well-defined systems and processes that have been strategically thought out, mapped out, applied, and then the opportunity is continuously optimize over time. It's the optimization. And
I
you,
wish that were true. Like, I look at it as like, we're going to have an experience whether it's designed or not. Let's be honest, right? And so I like that seems aspirational for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure everything is always as conscious as what you describe.
I think it's the consciousness or lack of consciousness coming back to awareness, particularly when it comes to optimization. It's that last step. I see a lot of, yeah, we'll think about this, we'll apply it, and then we're going to move on, check, we're going to move to the next thing, never coming back to how can we make what we've done even that much better. So we're starting to connect some dots here. You use a framework in this particular article, the 3 C's. And I liked how you framed this around an SMB case: competence, content, and contact. As we start to wrap up here, can you just briefly go through what these 3 C's are and where the opportunities are to provide or to showcase expertise with confident or competence, which would then increase the confidence of a prospective account holder? That then leads to the content to meet their needs, and then ultimately the contact to ensure easy access. Break that down, and because it is a framework that can lead to a positive experience.
Sure. Well, and I mean, you kind of set me up too, because so much of this, and it'll be fascinating to see how the adoption of generative AI tools potentially change this,
Mm.
and in how companies or brands can express themselves. But if you think about the Google search world that we've been in for quite a while, the Google search, the search result page is a fairly democratized experience. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of text. They constantly are playing with it, but it's historically been a very democratized experience. And I click on a link, and I'm going to have a very fast impression. And it's going to somewhere on a continuum from really exciting and interesting competence. They look like they're going to be really good at what I think the terms on the prior page told me they were going to do. Or if especially in today's age, if I get something that feels starkly misaligned to that, a website that feels 10 years old or 20 years old, I'm going to make judgments, whether I'm conscious about it or not, about that.
Yeah.
Right. And so competence is a somewhat complicated idea, but I'm going to make a judgment. And so being aware of how do we promote that? And I think, you obviously have had some history with this too, of if I say something on a Google result page and I don't reinforce that on the next step,
Mm-hmm.
I can create the kind of cognitive dissonance that people hit the back button on.
Yeah.
Or I have a really old website, I'll hit the back button. It's been so easy to shift now to consider other options that you need to be really intentional about that first step. And so to me, that's competence, showing you understand that, and encourage people to continue on that journey
Mm.
with you, and give me another minute to keep building the case. And so to me, if I can get through that first gate, now I can start trying to really address your needs. And that's where I say I use content as just a simple way to say, like, now I can start explaining how we understand you, or how we have served other people like you, or really try to start to connect those dots of how we might be a good option or solution to your need or problem. And that's content. And then ultimately, to me, contact is, if I've earned the right to engage with you, can you make it as easy as possible to allow that person to engage in
Yeah.
whatever way that may be, and give them the choice or the preference that they want? Not, hey, we think we've made a good case. The only option, if you want to do business with us, is come into the branch.
Right.
And that's just, in a digital world, that forcing people offline for banking just isn't a likely good conversion option. For a restaurant, where the story is the experience in person at the restaurant,
Sure.
yeah, that probably makes sense. But I'm not sure banks have found that equivalent. The experience in person is so enriching that I'll do that as my first step.
One of the questions I always like asking financial brand leaders is, it's a little bit of a trick question, but it's to meet them where they are.
Sure.
Where does a financial buying journey begin? And I'll get answers: Google, an ad, a referral. And I go, those are all great answers, but a buying journey really begins in the mind of a prospective account holder. And there are
Mhm.
three levels. You have the reptilian part of the mind, which is fight or flight, friend or foe. I call that the binary brain, basically. Can I trust you?
Mhm.
And back to your point, it's like these decisions are being made in microseconds. So that's a one or a zero. It's binary. It's like, I do trust you or I don't trust you.
That's right.
If okay, yeah, I think I can trust you. Let's move to the next level. Okay. Then we're moving into the emotive part of the mind, the amygdala. How do you make me feel? Well, you make me, I feel safe, I feel good.
Mhm.
Then we can get to the last part, which is more of the higher order thinking, the neocortex. Now we can ask the question or answer the question from the mind of a prospective account holder: how can you help me? And so all three of those different points are happening really just in rapid fire time. There's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of chemicals that are firing off too. in the mind. We're right here coming up on the top of our time together. You mentioned generative AI, and I'm curious on this because I have a hypothesis that as we move further into the age of AI and we see an influx of Gen AI, particularly around content, my hypothesis in complex buying journeys like financial services, there's an opportunity to unlock, capture, and amplify the expertise through human-centric content. Lenders, leaders, advisors through digital channels, i.e. social media, on the web page, etc. Because even in the age of AI, there's some human psychology that we can't forget. People trust people. People do business with people. Yes, we can go down the rabbit hole of deep fake and whatnot. Not going to go there right now, but I'm thinking through the context of banking. What must we, what, I'm getting tongue tied. What must we be mindful of when it comes to ensuring that we do still have a human experience? And maybe the human experience could be a differentiation point. It's just the way that we deliver that human experience. It might not be through the branch, but we're still communicating that through human-centric expertise.
I totally agree. And I think it's about how do you describe and define that expertise that's going to be critically important, because I may now rely on an AI to say, this is my perceived need. I'm a business owner of this type, and I think I need an expert, not just in commercial lending, but a commercial lender in my industry that understands the business dynamics, how to best price and optimize a loan term, rate, and even other elements of it for me. And I would then rely on the AI to go out and comb the world that Google may not be able to do in the same way. And so I can direct it more specifically and differently to go collect information and come back to me in a way where I may never need to go to those sites.
Sure.
But the sites still need to present that information so that the human can consume it. So I think it will be very much still, I want to work with people, but how I get presented information from them will be the really interesting exploration of this next era in my mind.
Yes.
And so how I tend to talk to banks about this is this term I use called redefining community, that they should be going through this exercise and saying, we've historically been a community bank in a geographic community, but is that the best place for us to serve as we look ahead?
Sure.
Or are there different definitions of community that might be industry groups or affinity types or even cultures or other populations that we should be trying to really hone and articulate our expertise toward? And that's where we can best serve a customer segment or niche and do that on a competitive and ongoing basis. And so it may end up through that exercise that your geography is still the best community for you to plant your flag and serve. I would argue, I think in most cases, you're going to find others either to layer on top of that or that you may be even more equipped to serve.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a cornucopia of ideas, perspectives. Thank you so much for sharing your points of view today to help others level up their minds and level up their growth going forward into the future. If someone wants to continue the conversation we started here today, Carey, what's the best way for them to reach out, say hello to you?
Easy to find on banktechventures.com, which you mentioned earlier. Also, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, where we have often have conversations, and so I'm easy to find on there. There just aren't that many Carey Ransoms in the world, and I guess that is one fortunate reality I have.
Well, connect with Carey, learn with Carey, grow with Carey. Carey, thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
Thanks, James Robert. It was a great conversation.
As always, and until next time, be well, do good, Be the light.